to continue?
Beyond a point, why will they? Why will they? Do you know China spends more on internal security than on the military outside? Their leaders are very scared about protests at home.
Have you been to China?
Yes.
And what's the vibe?
And I went to Wuhan. When Prime Minister Modi went a few years back, this was a summit between Prime Minister Modi and President Xi. And this also ties into the next question that you asked on why the Wuhan virus, because I've seen that city firsthand. It's a beautiful city. And I saw the people, they were very friendly. I saw the police, that was less friendly. They chased us away, not letting us do a lot of things. We needed permits for everything. We faced the struggles that we faced in countries like China while reporting there.
Countries like China being?
There are some countries where media freedoms are restricted. You need a lot of paperwork to do anything, right? So, and then not even 2020, actually 2019 December, somebody in my team came and said, there's some disease, that's spreading in China and such things happened. And we picked the story one day. Then 2 days later, he came again and said, this is happening. So we started reading, and it did not add up. I or my team, we do not have an anti-China agenda. We just stumbled upon a story, and we investigated and went deeper and deeper. And we found that there's a lot of problem here that the world is not talking about. And because I had seen that city, and to see images of Wuhan locked up and people standing in queues in hazmat suits, students not getting what they wanted, was a bit jarring for me. Also, the year 2020 on a personal front was a very difficult one for me. And then the year that followed, we've all, I'm sure, seen very bad days during the pandemic. We've seen people in our family end up in hospital. Both my children were down with COVID. For no fault of theirs, what did they do? We've lost relatives, friends. And how do you get away with this? It wasn't personal, but now it is.
You're basically calling it a bioweapon.
I don't know if it's a bioweapon. All I'm saying is that the virus spread, and the Chinese government did not do enough to A, warn the world. And if they have nothing to hide, then why don't they let an investigation happen? Why have you destroyed data samples? Why have you not given access to that laboratory? What are you hiding if you have nothing to hide? So the least that we can, it can be an accident, it can be a bioweapon, it can be a lab-created virus. Frankly, I don't have an answer because I don't have proof. But the least I deserve, and you deserve, and everyone else in this room deserves, is to know why we went through that horror for 2 years. How can we let someone get away with this and call him to meet him and shake hands with him and say everything is okay? It's not okay with me.
I don't know about that, but I definitely think some powerful people get pissed off with you. Like, honestly, I'm being very raw here. But have they ever gotten in touch? I think they were pissed off with you. Why'd you say?
No, they do complain. Obviously, there are complaints. But I think if no one's upset and offended, then you're only doing PR.
What happens with those complaints?
If they have merit, then we course correct. Most of the times they don't. So we let it be. I did something on say, for instance, Malaysian palm oil and how palm oil is in everything that we're eating. The food that we eat from outside, and it really impacts your health and so on and so forth.
And orangutans.
That too.
Go on.
So, no, but we got these long letters from the Palm Oil Association. Abhi hum kya kare? Palm oil is harmful for health. You may not like our story, but it's a story. So, that's a small example, but I'm just saying that a lot of times people register a complaint for the sake of it, and okay, we've seen it, and we're happy to publish our version, but we stand by our story.
Okay. Coming back to China, let's close that loop.
Okay.
We have a separate channel called TRS Clips. So this is the long form podcast which goes up on this channel, which is BOIS, and we have a separate channel where there are only highlights for audiences that don't want to consume an entire show. And by doing this, I've both marketed that channel, and two, I'm closing this loop.
You're so smart.
Let's close this China loop. What do you think is going to happen in the 20s and probably when the 30s begin?
I think there's a real risk of war with Taiwan. I think that's topmost on their agenda. They really want to. They made it about their prestige, and they want to do with Taiwan what they did with Hong Kong. I've been to Hong Kong too. I've seen the beautiful city that it was, and now what it has become. So I don't see the expansionism abated. I think that it's only this whole, while their diplomacy is changing tactics. They used to be called the wolf warriors. They would go everywhere, say all sorts of things to people. Now they're toning it down, taking a softer approach, even projecting themselves as victims and saying we are not the wolves. We are dancing with the wolves, which is America and the rest. But I think there is this attempt to power grab and grab land is very much there. The worrying part is what is happening on the border with India. That situation is far from resolved. We've had multiple rounds of talks. Despite everything, China remains our biggest trading partner. And that's not a good place to be in. Diversification and building alternatives cannot happen overnight. It will take time. So we have to bide our time, keep up our defenses.
Because the question that you asked is what?
Straight. I think we should.
Illusions and pretension.
Guy. What's up, man?
I'm good. How are you?
You're actually a normal guy.
I am. Social media gives you all these illusions and pretensions, but I'm just otherwise another guy.
Yeah, on screens I feel like if someone cuts you open, blood won't fall out, some fire will come out.
So being a lawyer, I think sometimes what happens is, regardless of your sign, you're fundamentally a Gemini.
Oh, okay.
Because you have two faces to you. One is the lawyer face and the other is the non-lawyer face.
Okay.
So, and if you happen to be a litigator, plus someone who is trained in Delhi and who lives in Delhi, aag to ugalna hai.
Man, okay. How would you introduce yourself to people who have no idea who you are? And there's very few of them watching this podcast.
Right.
You've been the most requested guest, literally probably since year 1 and we're in year 4.
Okay.
So, 2 questions. 1, how do you introduce yourself?
Right.
2, why are so many people lusting over you, Jay Sai Deepak?
So, I am a practicing advocate who practices as an arguing counsel before the Supreme Court of India and the Delhi High Court. I'm a commercial litigator out and out. So about 85% of my work revolves around intellectual property law, competition law, indirect taxation, insolvency, corporate litigation, competition law. So it's practically, let's call it the most forensic aspects of commercial litigation.
Forensic aspects of commercial
जहाँ पे
litigation.
बारीकी से आपको पढ़ना पड़ता है.
Okay, wait, break down each of those words for 13-year-olds.
Sure. So assume for a moment, let me do a compare and contrast exercise.
Sure.
So the rest of the 15% is constitutional law and international law. Okay, out of the 100% split. Constitutional law में होता क्या है that you fly at 60,000 feet. Human rights, okay, public interest, government, so on and so forth. Commercial litigation, facts, documents, comma, punctuation, correspondence, contracts, right? When you combine both, the mix is very different. Okay, very few people straddle the commercial world as well as the constitutional world, because the constitutional world is more, it tends to be slightly more activistic.
Okay.
People are constantly talking of just people, whereas in the commercial litigation, you talk money, you talk reputation, you talk companies, corporations, so on and so forth, right? So what happens is when you start looking at a commercial litigation, sometimes law is not what you're focusing on. What do companies typically do? This is the end goal I wish to reach. इसका रास्ता कैसे होगा? और बीच में red flags क्या आएंगे? Okay, that's how the decision process actually flows. So when you do that, you're expected to be very, very careful about what you say. Every comma makes a difference. Okay, so that is what I mean by forensic litigation. Let me give you a simple example. Some of the finest constitutional lawyers in this country were not and are not hardcore constitutional practitioners. Sri Nani Palkhiwala was a tax lawyer who made the jump to constitution later. Because tax law involves certain elements of constitutional law, and when he realized that he understood this better than most people, he made the switch.
Okay.
And because he understood taxation so well, which requires extensive amount of forensic reading, the definition of a salary is about 5 pages under the Income Tax Act. So when you bring those kind of skill sets to constitutional law, you are something else.
Okay.
Mr. Harish Salve is a chartered accountant turned commercial lawyer turned constitutional lawyer, and who now is entirely into arbitrations. He practices out of London. So when these people look at constitution, let's say level ही अलग होता है. So I think it's always better if you have certain hardcore commercial skills, and then you try and transpose them onto constitution.
You know, I totally hear you and I'm with you with
Right.
every word. I
Right.
don't know if the audience is with you. At this point, you're talking on a very high level.
That's the feedback for the first book, so I'll bring it down.
Yeah, so we can go to
Yeah,
this
yeah.
level again.
Right.
Why don't you answer the second question about why so many people go like, Jay Sai Deepak! Bring Jay Sai Deepak!
So
Let's make it a little immature, Jay Sai Deepak.
So I think I have realized this based on what I've read in the comment section and other places. The unfortunate reality is about 50% of the audience is focusing on my English.
Really?
Yes, and I think that's sad. Okay. And what I would want them to focus on is the content that I bring to the table, which I think is the dire need of the hour. Not because I'm bringing it forward, but that's something that I have benefited from, and I think people should have access to it.
Now I'll have to interject here based on whatever I've figured through the podcast, and I've had some extremely so-called left-minded people on
Right.
the show as well.
Right.
Okay, and I'll also give you the youth perspective. There's basically two wings that used to be called right wing and left wing.
Right.
Honestly, in our country, according to modern context, which I feel is the peak of any context,
Right.
It's actually pro-Modi government, anti-Modi government.
Right. Right.
Okay.
Right.
The pro-Modi has exactly what you said, Indic. Anyone who is Indic is also mostly pro-Modi because of the geopolitical scenarios of today in terms of there's no other leader in the country who would be able to take on China, America, Europe.
There is an overlap. It's not ideal.
As in?
In the sense.
Okay. Not all Indic fans are Modi fans.
Exactly.
All right. We'll break that down.
Right.
The left is a lot of urban elite. When I go for fancy parties, it's always someone who studied abroad who will even tell me, bro, you're too right wing. In my heart, personally, I do feel I'm a fence sitter because for me, according to what I've learned through media over 8 years, is that it is important to a certain degree for a media professional to constantly be a fence sitter. And if there's an extreme pro-Modi or extreme anti-Modi person, keep pulling them back to the center just in
Right.
order to extract more information and more learning. So I feel I constantly make an effort to sit on the center. That's exactly where I am right now. Very open to having my perspectives shaken. Okay? Coming back to the extreme left, lots of anti-Modi stuff,
Right.
lots of urban elite, lots of people in the world of history, which is a little strange, which I mean archaeologists, people who are spokespersons for history, etc. I would say all the religions other than Hinduism, some of Sikhism, Jains and Buddhists. So Muslim, Christian primarily, some Sikhs are on that anti-Modi
Right.
side. Primarily because if you actually go and speak to them, and I have a lot of Christian, Muslim, Sikh friends, they do feel that their status as a minority or a status as a person of another religion is threatened because of the current government, because of their whole CAB thing,
Right.
etc., etc., etc. They view Amit Shah and Modi as sort of versions of the devil. They won't agree to a lot of the pro-Modi perspectives.
Right.
In fact, people on both the ends are shut completely to the other side. Of
Correct.
this is the general youth picture.
Correct.
Now, would you correct me at any point? Like,
See, there are two things. One is a lot of people hate me for what I say. They have absolutely no personal equations with me whatsoever. So it's not as if I've done any personal harm or good for them to form an opinion one way or the other. So clearly, what are they hating? What I represent or what I stand for, at least what I claim to stand for. I would apply that logic to a significant extent to Mr. Modi. Most people don't know Mr. Modi on a first-hand basis. So what is it that they are hoping, or what is it that they are actually channeling their anger towards? He, according to them, represents the crystallization of Hindutva at the highest level possible. Political Hindutva. Which is to say where state power is openly Hindu. Allow me to say this, and this is my biggest criticism both of the left as well as the government establishment. They are first of all not Hindu enough. These guys have made them look Hindu thanks to their criticism. Because the question that you should be asking is, if a particular government is either pro or anti, the test is what? Policy. What has it done?
Pro-anti-Hindu.
Correct. So you should ask a question, the question is, what has it done for Hindus to say that he's pro-Hindu? What has he done against Muslims for someone to say he's anti-Muslim? That question is never asked. So it's empty opinions being aired in the form of angst without data or evidence.
Because angst within media spreads faster?
Faster.
Any other reason?
No, so one, angst, and two, it's lazy research. It's hard work to actually pull out the data and ask some serious questions. Okay. Here's a simple example. There's a very popular video during the CA protests or anti-CA protests. I think this was in Mumbai. Mr. Farhan Akhtar was participating in this protest, and the journalist asked, "What is it about this legislation that you oppose? Explain." He had no clue. Not the first clue what the legislation was about. Not the first clue what it was meant to deliver. He said, "इतने सारे लोग यहाँ पे हैं, तो कुछ तो होगा." So he's saying, "I'm here because there are others shouting." That's exactly how communist marches used to take place in Kerala in the 60s and 70s. So a bystander near a tea stall would be drinking tea. some idiot would be going about taking a protest march saying long live revolution, Viplavam, so on and so forth. This fellow will say, I will also join. He'll never ask the first question. क्यों चिल्ला रहे हैं? इसकी कोई बुनियाद है? Is there a basis for it? What is my position on it? Nothing. I challenge most people who think they know anything about the CA to tell me what the CA is about. They won't be able to.
You know what my next question is going to be.
Yeah, sure.
Explain it.
So you see, CA has a historical context. But before I come to the long-winded historical context, I'll give the straight answer. What does it do? Previously, for a refugee from Pakistan, Bangladesh, or Afghanistan, if they wanted to apply for citizenship in this country, there were a certain set of criteria that they had to satisfy. Cut-off dates, documents, how many years they've actually lived in Bharat for them to say that they intend to live in Bharat for the rest of their lives. That period was about 11 years. That was reduced to say you don't need to live here for 11 years to claim or ask for citizenship. That's one. And second is, it basically says in these countries, there is a marked anti-non-Muslim persecution, where non-Muslim minorities don't seem to be having a great time at all. And the demographics are fast dwindling. And with each passing day, there's a serious problem. Now, when they act on that and they come out with a CA, the first question that people ended up asking is, will Indian Muslims be affected by it? A specific amendment to the Citizenship Act, which is meant to facilitate faster acquisition of citizenship to refugees, उसका भारतीय मुसलमानों के साथ क्या लेना देना है? Ask yourself this simple commonsensical question. Show me one provision from that amendment which deprives an Indian Muslim of his right to citizenship. It doesn't deal with that at all. Target audience बाहर का है. आप अंदर के लोगों को यहाँ पे उकसा रहे हैं.
I think the question is, why not just apply it on the refugees and not the Muslims already living in it?
Very clear answer to that. In the backdrop of the two-nation theory still active and kicking, with partition having, let's say, played itself out on a religious basis, I have no reason to trust a Pakistani Muslim. I have no reason to trust a Bangladeshi Muslim. Okay, Pakistan was partitioned with a bloody partition in 1971. Okay. Did Bangladesh say we will now merge back with India? No. So the premise of the partition, which is two-nation theory, that Hindus and Muslims cannot live together, continues to be the premise for the existence of Bangladesh. Otherwise, they would have merged back. We celebrate what? Oh, common Bangladeshi culture, Bangla culture, language, sari, food and all that. None of that played a role, right? So therefore, we are very clear about the fact that I don't need to extend the very same benefit of doubt that I gave to the Indian Muslim to Pakistani Muslims or Bangladeshi Muslims under any circumstances. Then people said, what about Ahmadiyas? They are not seen as Muslims. Arey bhai, at least thoda to history padh lo. Ahmadiyas were among the foremost proponents of creation of Pakistan. You asked for it. अब वहाँ पे जाके आप भुगत रहे हैं. Why should we end up inviting you back? You'll come back here and create the same trouble that you did when you were with us. Please go to their website of Ahmadiyas of Pakistan. Their website categorically boasts that we are among the founding communities of Pakistan and today we are being ill-treated here. So an internal feud between Ahmadiyya Muslims and non-Ahmadiyya Muslims doesn't change the fact that you opted for a particular decision in 46 and 47, 1946 and 47. Why should I change my position?
Maybe because the grandparents opted for it.
You're telling me that the Ahmadiyya community continues or at least has no anti-Hindu and anti-India animus today? Wouldn't that be at least shouldn't that be the subject of a basic study to find out what is their position today? Okay, let's ask this question. Hindus and Ahmadiyyas are persecuted by the Punjabi Sunni majority of Pakistanis, of Pakistan. Okay? Did Ahmadiyyas ever find it in themselves to create an alliance with Hindus and say both of us are commonly affected? Let's speak up for each other. No. The Ahmadiyyas continue to spew venom against Hindus in Pakistan. Okay. So, if 80% of this country is Hindu, assuming, let's see, Naya census kya kehta hai, we don't know, it can be less than that. Why should I endanger the life of 80% of this country by inviting people merely to say, I too am secular, I too am humanitarian? मुझे ये सब बोलने की ज़रूरत ही नहीं. My national interest and civilizational interest comes first. Everything else is secondary.
What's the reality of CA today in 2023?
The unfortunate reality, which is why I said that Indic interest and BJP interest overlapping is just a happy coincidence. It's not 100% overlap. The rules have not been notified till date. At the very least, to the best of my limited knowledge and recent memory, 6 extensions have been sought from the parliament to come out with the rules to implement the CA. तो आपने CA तो लॉन्च कर दिया, बट आपने रूल्स के बारे में सोचा ही नहीं था. My question is, तो तैयारी किस लेवल की है? What is the level of your preparation? And in the process, the entire country is discussing an issue which the government has not shown the interest to implement yet.
Maybe because of the backlash it got.
In which case, I would then say, what strong government? Farm protest rolled back. CA, you haven't done this. Khalistani movement has been normalized. And someone managed to take out a tractor parade on the 26th of January. Okay. Right? The tricolor was pulled off. All of this has happened. Punjab is again looking at a situation where it may not be exactly the 1980s, but it seems like it is hurtling towards it. Then I have to say, what strong government? This is exactly where my disagreements come and my criticisms come. So the good part is that I'm not part of a choir which is constantly singing in praise of anyone. Okay? I'm clearly saying, give credit where it's due. Okay.
Alright.
But also disagree and point out the mistakes.
Okay. Cool. I heard like everything you said, and I'm going to give some of my own perspective here. Please correct me wherever you think I'm going wrong.
Sure.
Okay? This is from the perspective of extracting even more information.
Right.
And I'm also going to go one layer deep and say 2 things.
Right.
The one thing I've learned over my career is that data is the new oil. If you follow data and if you follow facts and figures, you will get growth, which is true. And at some points in this whole journey with data, I noticed that no, at some point you have to trust your intuition with certain decisions also.
Correct.
In terms of what is the human angle of this, etc., etc. Which has led to some very good decisions in my own career.
Right.
So I've begun to trust a version of data meets intuition. That's one thought.
Perfect.
The second thing I'd like to bring in is that we had a Tibetan monk on the show recently who explained Buddhism to me.
Okay.
Buddhism has a lot of similarities with Hinduism, and the more you kind of go to the depths of Buddhism, you realize, oh, this is very similar to us. He said that the one difference that he feels is Buddhism is centered first and foremost around altruistic thought, which means that when they say Om Mani Padme Hum, you're praying for the welfare of every sentient being, including animals, including whales, including
Right.
fish, including insects,
Right.
including humans of other faiths.
Right.
That stayed with me a lot after all these podcasts we've recorded.
Right.
And I feel I've become even more empathetic since I've started chanting, since I met him.
Right.
Because every podcast rubs off a certain energy. Okay? Which again makes me think that even with a decision like this, my opinion is that you should include some amount of intuition and see what the overall effects on the morale of the overall country are.
Right.
And while maybe, see, I'll never be able to argue with you as a lawyer about, keeping facts and figures in mind.
You can.
I don't want to. I'm not a journalist, dude.
Right.
I'm a YouTuber, I'm a podcaster, I'm
Right.
also learning.
Right.
What I will say is that you're the most, I hate using the word because you don't like it, but you're the most right person I've had on the show. Like, no
Right.
one has come on the show till now and said, no, the government's not doing enough.
Correct.
Like, you're the first person who's sort of pro-Modi, but is also pulling it further in that direction. Everyone is kind of on the central side, some right. My point is, maybe I've learned this through business and through managing human beings.
Right.
That even morale is a thing within the country.
Right.
And I'm also keeping present geopolitical scenarios in mind. You would have Genghis Khan, right? So, why the am I asking you that? So, Genghis Khan
Right.
grew up in Mongolia,
Right.
where he was at war with other Mongolian tribes.
Right. His wife was kidnapped.
Sorry?
His wife was
Yeah,
kidnapped. Right.
he saw a lot of atrocity because of the local civil wars where tribes used to face each other.
Right.
Eventually, when he took over the country, he knew that there's still going to be wars. There was a sort of inherent divide and rule mentality there as well.
Right.
So he said that no, instead of fighting with each other, let's coagulate, let's become one, and then go out and conquer